I'm talking about step-by-step protocol for traceability, and I don't want to insult anybody, so those of you that know about it can all leave, and that'll leave about one or two of you in here. But let's go through it the way I think about it, and the way that some of the state vets have to deal with it, and we'll just talk about it from that perspective. So first of all, we have to find disease, and we have to know what we're going to do with that disease once we find it, how we're going to control it, and most of the time, we're pitching for eradication. There are times when we can't, but our main goal, especially if it's a foreign animal disease or a new disease introduction or an emerging disease, is to find it quickly, draw a circle around it, and eradicate it. So what starts a trace, and how do we get to finding those animals? There's a lot of different ways, and there's different strategies that we have out there. Our first line of defense, you often hear us talk about it, is our accredited vets. They're out there, they're on the farms every day, they see the animals, they see things that are normal. They know normal when they see it, but they see things that are strange, and they call that in. And sometimes the things that look strange really aren't strange, and they're curious. So and you'll see in my slides later that we do a lot of foreign animal disease investigations. We don't find a lot of foreign animal disease, but when we do, all the alarms go off. So we're looking for that infected animal. And we've got surveillance programs in place for many diseases. And those diseases are surveilled at slaughter. We take blood samples to see if we can test for those diseases in the animal's blood. So there's a serologic reaction in that blood that we look for. We do rely heavily on the Food Safety Inspection Service to look at the animals when they first get to the plant, and they do what's called an ante-mortem or a live animal inspection. That's when they come off the truck, just to see what's going on with those animals. And sometimes they'll pick up disease there, and they'll pick up the phone, and they make a call either to the state veterinarian or to I'm going to use old terms, the AVIC or the AD in charge of that state. And those two work together very closely when it comes to disease surveillance and traceability. So FSIS is a partner, and we depend heavily on them, especially for certain diseases like TB. They do most of the surveillance that we do throughout the nation in those plants. So that post-mortem inspection and that ante-mortem inspection are very critical. We do routine movement testing. That means if a person wants to move breeding animals from one location to another, they test the animals to make sure they don't have certain diseases. Some states require more testing than others. Some states trust that the disease programs we have in place and that the statuses that we give states, and we give state status based on the testing that's done in that state and the history of that testing. We call them either free of TB or free of brucellosis, and most of the states in the United States are free of brucellosis. We have some hot spots for brucellosis in the Yellowstone Park area, and that's because not of the livestock that we have there, but of the practices that we use in those areas. We graze animals on BLM or Bureau of Land Management land where there are elk, and elk are about 50% of the elk in the Yellowstone Park area are infected with brucellosis. So that commingling lends itself to disease spread. So we're concerned about that, and we do testing for those animals. And we concentrate our surveillance or our testing in areas where we know there's disease. So if you ask where we're spending our money on brucellosis, most of our money is spent in the Yellowstone area for that surveillance. So that's what we do. Then the other piece of it is once we find an infected animal, you've already heard the words from the state vets about trace-ins and trace-outs. What that is we know we have a point of infection in a herd or a flock, and we want to know, how did they get it? Did they walk it into their facility? That can happen. Or did they buy it in? Or did they perhaps have it and ship it to someone else? So those words very simply are, a trace in means they bought it in. They bought it from someone else. They brought it in, and we know there's disease elsewhere. We trace that infection in from another premises or another owner. A trace out means that they had the disease, they sold animals to someone else, and now we want to make sure that those animals that they sold didn't spread the disease to that second premises. So that's a trace out. And that takes time. And then you hear him talk about epidemiology, and what does that mean? That means going through all the records. Now, we're making progress because we're going electronic, and that helps. But I can tell you a lot of our trace-ins, trace-outs are still done on paper. We still look through a myriad of records and shipping documents to try to find those animals and where they went. And that's if they were shipped correctly. There's still a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot. There's still those individuals that break the rules and move those animals illegally or through fraudulent terms. I once had a professor, and I've had several of my bosses say to me, we write the rules not for the 90% that follow them, but for the 10% that want to break them. So that's kind of what the rules are for. So trace-ins, trace-outs, you'll hear those words, and that's what initiates a trace. What's the process? Well, you also hear the words trace forward, trace back, and that's the same thing as trace-ins and trace-outs. We want to find those new locations. We want to make sure that we eliminate those and eliminate spread. Spread's hard to find, and we rely heavily on records, and I'll talk about records in a minute. But we go to the markets, we look at consignment records, we look at movement records, we look at individual certificates of veterinary inspection, which are filled out by veterinarians, which tell us where did that animal go and where did it end up. And that's a legal document that allows them to move based on what's going on in the state. We look at the state's records. We look at the market records. We pull all those records and we sit down and we try to find out where these animals moved. Electronically, we could do this a lot faster. If everybody would go to electronic, we could sit at our desks, not have to visit the markets and so on, just push a button and pull up the information. But we'd have to be linked. And that's where we're going. That's the future. When we talk about traceability, it's not just about putting a tag in an animal's ear. It's about being able to access the records that relate to that tag and where that animal went. So we work strongly on interstate movements in USDA. That's our purview. That's our look. The states then are responsible and work very hard on intrastate movements, as those are movements within the state and where their animals have gone. They also help us with the interstate movement because they maintain the records and they help us with that information. A little bit on foreign animal diseases. I want you to look at this chart for a minute, and you can see, and it goes through from 2008. I don't know if you can all see it, but right here at the end is 2008. There were 283 foreign animal disease investigations. About 7 were positive, meaning we found 7 instances of a foreign animal disease or an emerging animal disease. And you can see it's steadily gone up. And generally, since I started with the organization 28 years ago, we ranged around 300 to 350 foreign animal disease investigations each year. And we would find a few positives. It would be like VS or vesicular stomatitis or some avian influenza at low path. But we ventured into 2014 here, and you can see there were 540 investigations, 449 were actually FAD confirmed, and 540 were not found. Well, what happened that year? You guys remember? No one can forget, right? So, and then in 15 we were crescendoing out of that outbreak. And that's all high path AI. Okay? So then we had 216. Look at this. We have 836 investigations. 17 were found to be actual FADs. What happened that year? Can you remember what was going on then? What were we working on? You can remember. Paul, tell us. Seneca. That's all Seneca. 836 investigations. Seneca virus A looks exactly like foot and mouth disease in pigs. And these pigs tend to break at the slaughter plants after they've been shipped. Unfortunately, Wisconsin has, 5 major slaughter plants? Well, 2 for pigs and 5 for cattle, right? Well, anyway, so Paul's sitting on a gold mine because he's getting lots of pigs that are breaking. And we're doing a lot of investigations. And that's a lot of input of work there. So let's move to 2017. What's this all about? What? No, that's not screwworm. 17. This 17 here was some of the 17 was screwworm. What was this? That's still Seneca, but that's a combination of Seneca and PED. We still have that going on. It's endemic in the United States now. So that's the difference between an emerging disease, which was what PED when it first got here, which spread so rapidly, 22 states in less than a year, right? That's pretty quick movement of a virus. And we did a lot of investigations. So why is that a concern for us? Yeah, we got a couple viruses there that are pretty well. Let's just talk about them. If you read some of the literature out there, people talk about how the Seneca virus resembles and mimics and sits in the same family as what other virus? Foot and mouth. That's kind of scary. How'd it get here? Well, we don't know. Now, how did it spread? No one's quite sure. We just know it did, right? And we know it's still here. And we know it's endemic. And we know that in Taiwan, when they had Seneca virus, they did the same thing we're doing. They did a lot of investigations. Then they got kind of tired of it and they got lazy. And then guess what happened? They got foot and mouth disease. So we have to be vigilant in tracing and following through on these diseases, because when you get lazy, that's when you get the disease. And then when it gets to that point, it's too late and you're chasing it instead of finding it early. The best weapon we have is surveillance. To jump on these diseases early, to find them and stamp them out. My opinion of what happened with PED was it was a research project. And people were holding that information for publication. We knew about this virus, or people knew about this virus long before it was elicited or reported to USDA. Which is why USDA is working on and is putting forward a national list of reportable diseases. We want to know, we want people to report when they find these strange diseases, and labs, not that they hold on to them for publication, or I want to be the person that wants the first one to report this virus in the United States, but rather that if it's an emerging animal disease, we're aware of it, and we can help with that publication situation, but we really need to know it's there so that we can act or decide not to act on it. So I'll move on. Time is critical. Let's just go to this basic. This is simple. The faster we find the virus or the infection, the faster we can stamp it out, the less spread we have, the less virus load, the less everything. In Iowa, if you remember, during High Path AI, at one point, I think it was in April, there were over 13 million birds that had High Path AI waiting to die. Waiting to die. They were already sick. They were already diagnosed. We were trying to kill them. We just couldn't get it done. You go on those farms and test for virus months after the birds were gone, it was still there. It was in the environment. So that points to the fact that the faster you get rid of it, the faster you can clean it up. And that's another critical issue that you need to keep in mind when you're dealing with foreign animal disease. If we could have caught screwworm in Florida early, we could have gotten out of there a lot quicker, but it had established a breeding population by the time we found it. And so we had to do all due diligence to make sure we got rid of it. And that's what the groups came together and did. Tracing methods, I've kind of went through this a little bit. I can just say this. Without records, and without records being true and accurate, we're at the mercy of the disease. Records are so important. It's our pathway to finding where the disease is. States have rules and regulations about what those records should do and show and how long they should be kept. But I can tell you they still fall short in some instances. When we had BSE, let me back up. We never had BSE in this country. When we had a cows that were, when Canada got their first BSE case and we had imported animals from Europe through Canada, we had to prove to the world that we'd found all those animals. They were either dead, buried, or we had surveillance on them. So that when they went and they were killed, we knew exactly what their status was. It was a nightmare. Some of those cows have been in the United States 17 years. I remember trying to run down a Belgian blue that had been all over the country. And so records and tracing methods are important, but they aren't the only thing. And sometimes it's funny, you have to rely on boot leather and going out and talking to folks and finding out what they have and what they have available. And a lot of our folks are really good at that, both on the state side and on the federal side. Official ID. You're here to talk about this. I have my ideas about official ID. I think we got too many official IDs. My personal preference is that we cut down on some of this and get to the systems that work and get rid of the rest. I got no use for the noose tags. I'd like to see them go away. We can't retire them. There's not much we can do with them once. They're great when you put them in the ear, and they might work for a production system, but they're terrible when it comes to traceability and retiring the tag themselves. We have better systems and we should be using those and eliminating some of these other things. RFID, definitely the way to go. We use back tags in the plants. Do people know what these are? This is an official back tag that we stick those on lots of cattle when they come into the markets. Not every animal is tagged, but they come in groups, and that tag will get them back to the group that they came in with, and the market records will get us back to the farms of origin. So when the truckers pick them up, we use that. And then there's other RFID type stuff here, and this is just a site tag that a producer. This is a lovely noose tag here. It's all metal. If they're in the ears long enough, the serum from the ear kind of erodes off the numbers, which makes them essentially useless. And I've seen that. After 3 or 4 years, you go back to read the tag and 2 or 3 of the numbers are missing. The problem I have with these site tags and these original noose tags is studies done on human beings and recording these types of tags that aren't electronic is that 1 in 6 individuals makes a number about every 10th tag. And so you can imagine the problems that can cause. And a lot of humans are dyslexic. 7s look like 1s and 6s turn into 9s. When I was at the exotic Newcastle disease outbreak, we had a 1.3 million bird complex that was tested for exotic Newcastle disease, tested positive. And we tested a neighborhood flock, a backyard flock that was very close by. The numbers were exactly a 6 on the end and a 9 on the end. I was very curious that million bird complex might not be positive. So that's the other thing we do in trace in and trace outs. We go back and test. We never rely on exactly the first test. We want to make sure and we confirm with additional testing. So we went back on this farm and we retested it. Turned out the backyard flock was positive and the 1.3 billion bird complex was not. So if we went in and just inadvertently killed all those birds, huge loss to the producer. So we double check it and we double test. And we confirm. Records. I can't say enough about records and how important they are from many aspects. One, to showing that it's your animal or not your animal, to the records that are used in the livestock markets, the slaughter barns, the slaughter facilities, everything we record on that animal that we can get an answer. Sometimes we're down to genetics. And we're now implementing rules that say to ask FSIS when they take a tag out of an ear, and all types of man-made ID are supposed to be retrieved and recorded, that they attach a piece of skin. Why are we doing that? We want to match the lesion or the infected animal to the genetics of the tag, because many times, and I've been in the field myself, where you show up on a farm and say, we have a trace to your farm. It's not my cow. You guys messed up. Well, genetics pretty much nails it to the ground that this is your cow, and we're going to move forward with our trace. So those are important directions where things are going. But electronically, we can move faster if we can do it electronic. So here's the big struggle. Everybody has their set of databases, their ways of tracing, and their way they keep their records. Personally, I don't really care about all this. I care about this. Somewhere in the middle, I want a system that can get the data that I need from other systems and can give the data to those systems from my systems. That's what we want. And those are portals. That's what we got to concentrate our money on and build. Because everybody has a system that they like. My IT folks go nuts on this stuff. It's like, oh, well, we got to build a new system and it'll cost $3 million. And I'm like, another one? No. We need to do this kind of thing where we can all talk to each other. And that's where we need to spend our money. And that's where we need to move forward. Permitted movement. States do a good job in saying to other folks that want to move animals, you need to call us for a permit. You need to tell us where those animals are going. And we'll give you a permit number and we'll allow you to move them in. Then we know. We know where they went. And that's necessary. Where this really comes into fruition and is extremely important is during a foreign animal disease. Because we're going to have animals that are in diseased areas, maybe not in the quarantine area, maybe not in the surveillance area, but in the state. And they're going to need to move. We have a lot of just-in-time production in the United States, meaning that when an egg hatches, there's a baby chick that just moved out of the hatchery somewhere else. And there's another egg coming in behind that egg. Okay, and then there's pullets being set, and there's broilers being set, and all that production follows, and there's no space. Once you back that up, you stop that movement, you have a big animal welfare problem because you have to start deciding which animals live and which animals die. Because you've just held up that production facility. So permitted movement, how we're going to move those animals during foreign animal diseases becomes extremely important, and that's a really big factor for a foreign animal disease. More animals were killed in England, and I was over there for animal welfare issues, than ever got the disease. Almost triple. So keep that in mind, and we're worse in the United States because our production is tremendous. We're moving animals all the time. It was said that I think in North Carolina, I don't know if I get this right, there's up to 1 million pigs being moved on the road each week out of there. That's a lot of pigs. And they're little ones, of course, but they still are moving. That's all I have to say, and thank you for your time.